So with that, I wanted to turn to the next panel session. This will be moderated by Professor Rachel Cummings and on privacy security in smart streetscape technologies. Rachel is an associate professor in industrial engineering and operations research and also has a courtesy appointment in computer science here at Columbia University. And she's a member of the Data Science Institute and co-chairs the Cybersecurity Research Center here. She's also a fellow of the Center for Democracy and Technology, and primarily her areas of interest are in data privacy with connections to machine learning, algorithmic economics, optimization, statistics, and public policy. And so joining Rachel, I saw her earlier, there, please join us, is Kenji Yoshihira, Ruben Beltran, and Sal Stolfo. Welcome to the stage.
While our panelists find their seats, I will embarrass them with their bios and talking about how incredible they all are. We are so lucky here. We have 3 experts in this area, spanning industry, government, and academia. I will read their bios in the picture order. So we first have Kenji Yoshihira, who is the director of the U.S. Ecosystem Innovation at NEC Laboratories. Kenji's work creates consumer-focused solutions to address complex issues in diverse sectors. He has over 15 years of experience in the fields of data science and applied machine learning, and he has co-authored around 60 papers, 40 patents, and 10 books. Next, we have Chief Ruben Beltran, who is the Chief of Information Technology at NYPD. He first began his career on patrol in Brooklyn, and he's rised through the ranks of the NYPD, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I will skip a few because there are many up to his current role, Chief of Information Technology. He is a graduate of Columbia University as well as the Harvard Kennedy School. And then finally, we have Dr. Sal Stolfo, who is a professor in our own computer science department here at Columbia. He works in the field of machine learning applied to intrusion detection, anomaly detection algorithms, and of particular note is his work detecting zero-day attacks. He's also a fellow of the ACM and the IEEE. So let's welcome all of our distinguished panelists. So we'll start by just acknowledging this is a really challenging topic. How do we handle privacy and security in smart streetscapes? The only way that we can have a smart streetscape is by putting a bunch of devices collecting data on the street in public, and so incorporating privacy into this is a big challenge. So we'll first ask, what are the biggest gaps in current privacy and security standards, and also how do these impact like a deployment in these streetscape? And I'll start with you, Sal.
I know several of my colleagues here have heard me say this, but for the rest of you, I'm the voice of evil. So the research that I like to do is to think about the deployment of technologies and how to misuse it. Not that I'm going to do it personally, but somebody will do it. And so how can we prevent that? And I've been sitting here and looking around the room of all the various embedded systems that are in the room. And if you all notice, there's, what, 6 cameras? And if you think of streetscapes, there's going to be many, many more devices that are placed in the physical world. And what's different about that is that they're accessible to just about anybody who's in that physical world. And so the physical security aspects of protecting the devices, because if I can get access to a device, I can break it. And breaking it is bad news, because you can make that device then do all kinds of misuse sensing to essentially say there are a whole bunch of citizens walking across the street when there are none, or vice versa. There are a whole bunch walking when then you tell the system there aren't any. And the thing that I heard earlier, which I found a real great opportunity, was the real-time control of traffic lights. What would it mean if all the traffic lights were told to turn green at the same time? That sounds pretty bad, right? What if you turned red at the same time? That sounds like less harmful, except that in New York, it doesn't matter what color the light is. But you get the point. So the important thing is you have to have a security architecture over all of these devices. And the question that I ask a number of my colleagues in the streetscapes is, who is going to manage all that? Who's going to be responsible for it? Are the systems going to be configured correctly? Are they going to be tested? So one of the primary areas that I'm particularly interested in and that we should spend a lot of thinking about is how can the system protect itself and secure the fundamental systems that will be attacked. So for just a simple example, these cameras are placed, this one behind me can see all the others. So streetscape technology should inspect streetscape technology and to protect it from illicit misuse activities. I think that should be enough because I don't want to scare you. It's starting a beautiful sunny day and I don't want to make you depressed.
Ruben, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Well, as a person that has that responsibility, the NYPD, because we do have devices deployed, we have audio sensors out there for gunshot detection. We do have video cameras out there that support our video collection and subsequent forensic analysis of that video to be able to solve crimes. We have fixed license plate readers as some examples of technologies that are out there. And I use one particular for an example, which, by the way, we're learning that from the early implementations to try to secure or physically keep these devices secured, it can also have an effect, a negative effect on how they can operate in integrating other technologies into it also. So some of it also has to do not just keeping it physically secure, but being able to know like what's on the horizon for this technology. How do we want it to work with other technologies, and is our installation and security concerns, balancing with that also? Because one of the examples is we have almost 70,000 cameras now that are accessible to the police department. For us, mainly for counterterrorism purposes. But like I said, we do use them forensically if a crime occurred. But in order to put them in a location where they're not going to be vandalized and where they could continue to operate, we have to put them up very high, right? And a lot of the algorithms that we're talking about here that either AI uses or machine learning uses to identify objects, and to do other types of automated detection usually require a view that's a lot closer to ground level, in order for it to function appropriately. So some of the challenges that we have now is, number one is volume, right? The number of cameras. So I think one of the former speakers for the last session was talking about the use cases for how do we use computer vision, right? For example, and how do we do that processing, right? We're talking about edge processing, right? So a lot of our technology really is built behind the aggregation point and not at the edge. But if we want to get more real-time notifications, some of the technology has to be pushed out, right, to the edge. So in terms of in terms of gaps that we have out there, we're understanding. And by the way, when we first started installing cameras out there for crime reduction, Argus cameras, we call them in the police department, that was occurring back when we weren't even envisioning that there was going to be opportunities, or at least this soon, artificial intelligence, or something to help us manage this device, the data that it's collecting, and to be able to to obtain intelligence and information from this data that we're gathering. So it's just something that's consequential. But now that we know it, we have to think about that as we're designing the installations and be more aware of that and more cognizant of that. And of course, the physical is one thing, and also we try not to hide what we're doing, right? Because the fear is, right, police state, right, the secret, surveillance of its citizens. So the best way to keep it physically secure is don't tell anybody where it's at and hide it, right? But we really can't do that and balance that equation. But we also have to tell people where our devices are, that you're under surveillance in this public area, and that gives us another challenge there in terms of how we install technology, because it's hard to keep something physically secure when you're telling people where it's located. So those are my comments in regards to that question.
Thank you. And I think that is, in fact, a really excellent transition into my next question, which is about, as you talk about sort of management of these things, there's also a question as we go higher up, how do you regulate some of these objects? How do you regulate privacy in a public space? So my question is what do policymakers need to better understand about privacy and security of technology deployed in this streetscape? And I'll turn that back over to you in case you have any more thoughts, Ruben.
This is an area too that obviously, with the implementation of technology and that concern or anxiety regarding police state, that's really been a big consideration of the police department. I have 38 years in the police department now. Almost half that time, more than half now, was working as in the technology bureau. So I had the benefit of having 2 careers in the police department, fighting crime and then supporting the apprehension of criminals, using the technology. So I created in 2004 the first real-time crime center in the country that had access to a lot of data, right? And I don't think really the discussion came up either with our legal people as much. There was always been concerns about sealed records, about records that we have of individuals that were found not guilty or acquitted of criminal activity, but never really questions about the wholesale nature of our data, the information that we have, and in the event that it gets in the wrong people's hands, right? So I think back then we had over 20 million records that were accessible to the Real-Time Crime Center in terms of all different types of incidents or encounters that citizens would have with the police department. My observation is that there was a big concern about that from the press when we announced that, and at least during that generation, because almost 20 years later, I think in 2018 there was a legislation was created and approved in New York City for the public observations of surveillance technologies, which kind of formalized the way that NYPD can introduce, can use, can evaluate technology. They created, as part of that legislation, an opportunity for us to describe what that impact use policy is going to be. So that way we're describing what the technology is, how we intend to use it, and what we expect the impact to be to people interacting with that technology. And it gives time for feedback for anyone in the city and elected officials to report back, right? To report back and make comments. Then we have a period there where we can modify our policy if appropriate, or change policy, or include things that we hadn't considered in the past. So I believe there's over 20 IUPs that we have, and it's available online. So anyone can go online to see what technology is NYPD using, what are they using it for, and then as we introduce changes and modifications to that, we also modify, using the same process to modify our impact and use policies. So I think that's a great way to address that. That didn't exist when I started introducing this technology before. But I also noticed that even though there's an apprehension for new technologies when we're about to implement it from this surveillance like phobia, but there comes a time afterwards where people get so comfortable with the technology, with their commercial, with the services they're purchasing and they're subscribing to, that they assume the police department has these capabilities and technologies, right? So some of the biggest requests I get now are from elected officials asking me for how much it would cost to put additional sensors out for ShotSpotter, or how much does a mobile license plate reader cost, or a fixed license plate reader device cost, or how much does a video camera, Argus video camera cost, because there's less concern from the community. But I think like now with artificial intelligence, I think you're going to see there's going to be similar anxiousness and probably necessarily so a discussion about the concerns on how it's going to be implemented. So I think artificial intelligence is going to be the next group here. New York City already has an artificial intelligence planning and implementation policy. NYPD is following close behind on that. And some of that's going to be integrated into existing IUPs from the way we use some of our technologies now. And some of them will create new impact and user policies regarding this new technology.
Thank you. So let's now turn to the people on the street, to the end users who are going to be observed. I don't want to use the word surveilled because that seems bad, but who will have their data collected as a part of a smart streetscape. How would you explain privacy and security guarantees of smart streetscape technology to these end users, to the people on the street? Because I hope that as sort of many of the folks in this room know, we are very thoughtful in making sure that our technologies on the street do provide privacy and security guarantees of the data, but if people don't know about it, then they don't feel as good about it. So we'll start with Kenji. How would you explain this?
Great point. Thank you very much, Rachel. In my view, I think end user perspective and then the public consent mutually affect each other in shaping the implementation and the acceptance of the services, policies, and also technologies. So I think the public consent has two different aspects. The first one is more like a hard part, like a regulations, agreement, and discussed, defined by the multiple stakeholders, local governments, of course, expertise from universities, also representative of the local communities. The other side is more like a soft one, like emotion from the individual. I would say elastic will of the public sentiment, which is very hard to grasp. So generally, I think these two parts are discussed separately, but I think we should put these two different things on together. So in a sense, I think a large industry company like NEC should take a big responsibility to discuss both together. And thinking about NEC has a long history of the IT system integration in a different environment and working also different business models, like B2B, B2C consumers, and B2G government side, sometimes B2A academia together. So in a sense, we always keep this like user perspective in focus. And the same thing here in New York City, user perspective must not be overlooked. So that's one of the reasons why our involvement at CS3. So I will also share a couple of use cases NEC has conducted, mainly in Japan, which is because Japanese company. So the one is Osaka station. I think biggest station in the west part of Japan. Working together with a government-affiliated organization, we have tried to install like a facial recognition camera to keep track of the human's movement. But I mean, station in Japan is not just a train station. It's more like a commercial facilities, including stores, restaurants, different kind of shops. So the goal of like keeping track of the movement of the human is more like to optimize the more like a business side of all these tenants in a public station. But unfortunately, it was a little bit failure. We are forced to stop the experiment, the proof of the concept. Even though we have implemented these facial recognition technologies without keeping any personal information, we throw away once if we keep up the features of the individuals. As far as we can keep up the movement, we don't need it. We throw it away. Also, we securely integrated all the different systems. But due to the lack of the communication to the end users, we talked with the representative of the community, but not to the real end users. So unfortunately, we couldn't solve that. But we have also a successful case, which is Roppongi Commercial District, which is the center of the Tokyo. And we have also installed the same technology, facial recognition camera, on called like a smart lights on a public street. Actually, we do the same thing to keep up the human movement to help local communities. But we have done rounds of discussions with local government, law enforcement, also like experts from universities, representatives from the local commercial councils, unions, other people, and also emphasize the benefit, actually not just to help all these tenants, but also for the public safety purpose, including gunshot detection stuff. Actually, there's no guns in Japan, but still, I think we have to still maintain the safety. So this is a really successful case. We really see the importance of the end user perspective.
Great, thank you. Ruben and Sal, I know you both had some thoughts on this. I'll let you figure out who goes first.
So convincing the public is the hard part. The easy part is losing that after you convince them by breaking trust. I mean, trust is so easy to lose. So no offense. I know, well-intentioned, I understand societally. Yeah, okay. So I got a ticket from one of the NYPD cameras who claimed I was driving in an all-bus lane, but it's the Bronx, and most of the Bronx is under construction. So the lane was probably an all-bus lane, but you couldn't tell, because the street was all chopped up and the signs weren't up. Yet I was charged $50 through the mail, and so $50 doesn't sound like much, and that's why I paid it, because I couldn't fight it. If I fought it, it would probably cost me $200 in time and going down to City Hall. So that made me think, this is a brilliant way for policymakers to quietly start sucking up more fees from the citizenry, which is the new pricing that we're going to enjoy in June, mostly to keep the New Jersey drivers out, which I'm all for. But that raises a very important point, so that if you start changing policy and misusing it from the citizen's perspective to do things like increase revenue, you're going to lose that trust very fast. That's my only point. How do you feel about it?
So I'm glad you brought up a great example, because those cameras are not NYPD cameras, so they're DOT. And that's part of this, right? Is people understanding. But if people think that every camera that's up there is an NYPD camera, then it looks like it's, right? It is a surveillance issue, right? It's a public surveillance issue. But the DOT cameras, red light cameras, speed cameras, bus lane cameras, those cameras are not police department cameras. And we only have access to them forensically. Like if we knew that there was a shooting and that the vehicle took off and they were riding in the bus lane, then we would use that technology and have access to it only for that specific purpose. So, but it brings up a good point, right? It's in these IUPs, and we're talking about the use, the way the technology is going to be used, it has to be consistent with that, right? And there needs to be ways to prove it and to validate it, right? So I think, that's probably the most difficult part, because, like you said, the second that we have a breach in that policy, or, and data is accessed for a non-department purpose specific to that IOUP, then we lose, credibility, with the public, and also in terms of what our intent is, right? So that's very important to us, describing how we're going to use the technology. A lot of the technologies that we also access already belong to private stakeholders, right? To companies, corporations, critical infrastructure, so we have access to that. In addition to the IUPs, we also have legal agreements of that really dictate how we're going to share that information, how we're going to use that information. Retention is very important, right? Because, if we've got video cameras out there and your images are showing up in those cameras, then why are we keeping them for 20 years? So usually our storage is around 30 days, and it's erased, right? So, and the only parts that we do, if we tag a particular piece of video as part of an ongoing investigation, then we have the ability to retain that to whatever the statutory purpose is for that particular investigation, or it becomes part of the case, right? Because the other part where we have to now utilize technology is that once we have that captured, technically it's evidence in the possession of the police department, and we have to turn that over in terms of discovery, right? So us knowing exactly what information we have, how long we have it for, and also to be able to tag it and identify information that we need to keep longer for that and to be accessible by district attorney's offices creates a whole new integration, and I think it also creates it should create a sense of relief for for people also accused of crimes, because if you're somewhere else, it's easy to prove that you're somewhere else, and a lot of the tools that we have now are also available. It's not just used for us to arrest criminals, but also to develop enough evidence to make sure we can convict them, and also, to be able to exclude people and to be able to identify each individual's actions in regards to a crime, which is very important when people are charged with crimes when they are in concert with other individuals. So I think building up that privacy, how we use it, our storage requirements, our utilization, our auditing. We audit all of our department users. We have integrity control officers assigned to every unit in the department, which is probably over 200, 300 units that have access to data. And we have to audit it to make sure that any transaction that they did was specifically for a department purpose. We access information from the state and from the federal government, and that's also governed by agreements that we have with CJIS, which are Criminal Justice Information Services for the FBI, and with the state police. So we have to make sure that any information that we use is specifically for department purpose, and we have to prove how we're protecting that data, and we get audited by state and federal auditors to make sure that we're doing that.
Thank you.
It's an apology, was it?
We'll count it. So let's now look forward to the future. And we are really living in a changing world, especially when it comes to sort of emerging AI technologies. I was actually I'm thinking about this as I taught my class on sort of a privacy policy and machine learning. This week, in my class, I was using slides from last year talking about privacy and sort of generative AI, and I realized these slides are completely out of date and no longer describe the world that we're in, and that's only 1 year. And things show no sign of really slowing down. So with that, how do you anticipate privacy and security risks changing as we continue to explore new ways to integrate AI capabilities into smart streetscape applications? And I know all three of you have some thoughts. Who wants to start? Great.
I'm sorry first, Rachel, even though you mentioned about the bright future, the technology side, but I want to start with a little bit negative observation in myself. So definitely AI, advanced technologies, definitely will help the improvement of the privacy preservation and protection. But I think the same technology could be amplified with the other side for attackers to violate all these privacy issues. I think because the nature of the AI itself, right? I think machine learning, statistical analytics, the other component of the fundamental technologies, basically naturally for inference of the information which you don't know, unknown data. So that's basically what attackers do. So basically, I think these technologies actually helps for the negative side. But I'm not really pessimistic because still I think AI, currently we are focused on like AI algorithm side. I'm not complaining about the algorithm side of computer science, but still I think we have to think about the whole solution and whole AI solution concerning like the data collection, aggregation, as the chief mentioned earlier. So NEC possesses very unique technology called like a fiber sensing, utilizes conventional optical fiber cables, which is used to install and then used for the standard communication, data transmission. But now we adapt the same technologies for the sensing purposes. So in order to ensure the high-speed transmission of the data over the fiber cable, we have to develop the filtering technologies, removing all the noise from around the cables. We use the same technology for the sensing. So every point along sometimes like a transcontinental range cable, we can actually detect any like a vibration or like a molecular level movement around the cable. So we installed. Actually, it's not installed. It's been already installed. The cables are already installed in a public space, like a street, highway, kind of stuff, which can actually monitor, say, like the movement of the pedestrians or movement of the cars. So I think this is a point. So I'm not complaining also about the advantage of the computer vision, but without any risks of the exposure of the personal information by using a camera, still we can detect human movement just using those like vibrations. But that requires advanced AIs. The quality of the data is still same, but the magnitude of the data is much, from the fiber sensing, just the signals, not just like visual images. But still we need to associate different kind of the features from the signals. That can eventually helps realizing the human movement. So what I mean is, it's not just about the one piece of the technologies in AI. We really need to think of the whole view, including data aggregation, using different sensors. So I just want to know the positive side.
So the discussions we're having right now regarding artificial intelligence, and it was recently kind of publicized regarding media reports of problems on the city's website, that it was the chatbot that was created there was giving people incorrect answers and sometimes directing people to do stuff that will be unlawful and lead to fines, right? So obviously that brings up a problem. But I think artificial intelligence, I think drones, which are very big now, and that we're increasing the use of drones in our environment, and gun detection systems, which they all have an AI component to them. Right? The drone is just really a mobile device, and it depends what devices you have on that drone that permit other analytics, surveillance, and so forth. But they do raise concerns, and I think the concerns for the police department really started probably around 18 years ago. 15 years ago, we started facial ID. It was one of the projects that I worked on. That I didn't think the technology was necessarily ready. I thought it was good, but I think in New York City it's got to be almost perfect, right, for us to utilize it in an investigatory way. And I think the way that we ended up integrating it into our case management system, and we ended up training that staff to be the human element, the human component in the identification process to validate what the, what the computer vision, what the algorithms were determining as a high confidence hit, right? So I think no matter what we do in terms of AI and what we do in terms of automation, we need to ensure that there's a human, at least for law enforcement purposes, and especially for criminal investigative purposes, that there's a human validation process there. One of the first AI demos that I saw when I came back to IT, I was the Queensborough commander. They brought me back a couple of years ago. They gave me a demonstration. I was like, all right, that's a great answer. How did you get to it? Oh, well, I can't tell you that. Right? It was a large language, large learning model. And I was like, well, then we can't use it. I need to be able to validate what sources came up with that solution to give us that confidence rate. How reliable is the source? And to be able to explain it so it could be corroborated by a human that will have to testify, in court for that. So, I have seen over the last year, I see more demonstrations now of artificial intelligence technology where they're building tools to help manage these models. These models are being trained, I think someone mentioned this about this panel before, specifically for like narrowing the domain of what this model is going to learn, right? So that way you can reduce and prevent drift as much as you can, but also keep track. This management of these models also keeps track of the validation, right? So it needs to be continued to be validated, tracked. What are we using it for? What's the percentage of drift? Which I think is a big, from one year to the next, to have those type of capabilities in a catalog of artificial intelligence models that we can use to solve specific problems is on the right page. And I think that is going to be integrating those components together to solve complicated problems, right? So I think that's the direction we're heading in. I think the human element is going to continue to be heavily important, at least for law enforcement in this particular domain. And I think that the technology itself, and I like the way somebody mentioned before, let the technology check on itself, right? So I think eventually one of these models could be a model that will check other models to make sure that they're still kind of within the parameters that we can utilize and depend on and rely on for decision making.
Proverbial fighting fire. So I can't remember the report, but it was something on the order of 3 to 5 weeks after everyone got Chat GPT crazy. A whole bunch of phishing sites were deployed by the bad guys who were using it to take BOA or Chase, take their websites and create a version of it using the AI technology, the LLMs, to create really, really good phishing sites. The only solution was to fight back with AI, to apply models against sites to determine whether they're fake or not. So AI has dual use, both in a positive way for us to build more interesting technologies using intelligence, but also we need AI to battle against the misuse of the technology. Now I've been doing that since 1996, using machine learning for intrusion detection. It's just such a hard problem to look at vast quantities of data and determine whether or not you've been penetrated. AI can provide a solution by learning, for example, what's normal, what is a typical statistical baseline for a system, and then look for abnormalities that reveal misuses. It's a very powerful and useful, and it'll only get better technique. And so AI is both, dual use, and thank God, because the bad guys are going to utilize it even better than they've been using it now. And there's really little defense other than using AI against them to stop them. End of story. By the way, there was an earlier comment about how you convinced user population about security guarantees. Can you define what a guarantee is of a secure system? Because I've been searching for that forever, and so it's really hard to actually guarantee anything. But that's life. You just have to be
Great.
very diligent.
So I think we have some time for a question or two from the audience. I see we have.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. So I like the idea of privacy and security. So I'll talk with you, Chief Beltran. How do you get the voice of the community? You know, I live and work in Harlem. My name is Clayton Banks from Silicon Harlem, and I'm curious the impact that happens in those type of communities. And so, and all three of you, if you want to talk about it, but is essentially, how do you get their voice to it, right? So if that's important to you.
Well, I think part of it is, right, identifying leadership, right? So I just finished saying that I had 2 separate careers in the police department. I was a precinct commander. I was a narcotics investigator. I was a borough commander servicing Queens South, which is around 1 million people, 2,400. And part of that, most of that job, not really fighting crime, is really talking to the community and community leaders about what the needs are, what the expectations are. I think one thing the department does need to do better, right, because part of this is creating the conversation, is trying to build an interest with the community to discuss this in a more formal sense, in a more regular basis, right? Because even when we do these post modifications, we don't get really a lot of comments, right, about it. You know, not that you would think in terms of a city of 8 million people, right? So, or 8 million plus. So I think there's an opportunity for us we kind of need a campaign to like inform people like they have, there is information available to them and they can contribute to that conversation. I've had one of the things that I used to do as a borough commander was actually go to precinct community council meetings, community board meetings, civic association meetings, and that's the perfect place, right, to introduce these topics, right? So what I'm doing now is, and there's been some scheduling issues that have delayed them, I'm going, and there's going to be 2 things. Me going to select places and surprise them and tell them about what we're doing about technology, but also training executives in the police department. It's kind of hard for precinct commanders to go out there and communicate with the public in terms of how we're utilizing technology to keep them safe and to address any concerns they may have if they're not trained and oriented in it, right? So I've had my staff, my lieutenants, my deputy inspector in charge of our strategic technologies speaking to new supervisors, new commanding officers, and we have executive development programs where we're giving them, letting them know what our capabilities are, where this technology is going, so they can have those conversations in those community meetings. As a precinct commander, I would talk to them every month, and I would talk to, at least at the precinct community council meeting, each one of those constituent groups I'm speaking to once a month. So I think it's really more about force multiplying, because even though there's press and there's advocacy groups, I think the normal individual doesn't know much about it and doesn't care much about it, right? But if the adversaries, right, in terms of advocacy groups or privacy activists have the only word, we will never implement any technology. And there's an expectation that we do that, right? If someone gets shot in front of this, we have an Argus camera that's clearly marked to be an Argus NYPD camera or under surveillance, and someone gets shot there and nobody responds there for like 4 hours. Why do we have that camera there? That's what I would think if I lived across the street from there, if I lived a block from there. I was like, well, who's watching them? Well, we don't have enough cops to watch 70,000 cameras. But technology can help us identify if someone pulled out a gun. So we can start responding there. And that still has to be validated, right? Because the technology here is not 100% confidence, and it's not, you know, it's fallible, right? But we at least need to be able to test and to implement these capabilities that will give people a level of security and privacy that they expect. Because why put a camera here? Why spend that much money of taxpayer money putting it up there if we're only going to use it to, after the crime occurred, right? So I think that's the way we could get the word about it. That's the way we do it now, but we could definitely improve in that area.
So with that, I think we are at time. And let's thank all of our panelists again for their expertise.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cummings, Stolfo, Chief Beltran, and Kenji. Thank you very much again. So we're going to take a 20-minute break. There's still coffee outside in the lobby, and also restrooms are either out through this door, or you could go past the elevators to the left. You'll see that. So we'll start again at 11 with the perfect pitch session.